The majority of our business now is fulfilled through the online platform.
How did you present this idea to the family? We've done business for decades like this. How about this?
I had the itch that I wanted to shake things up a little bit. If we were going to have any success with this, I needed to start getting my hands dirty in software. I know this is crazy right now that we're doing one $17 part, but trust me, there's a vision here. Starting Fabworks was out of pure necessity to get the business profitable again.
Welcome to the Next Gen Metal Fab podcast. I'm your host, Tim Heston. In each episode, I'll be joined by a rotation of co-hosts. Caleb Chamberlain from OSH Cut, Cody Lee from Everyday Technologies, and Lance Threekill from All Metals Fabricating. Together, we'll talk about what the future could look like for precision sheet metal and tube fabrication.
Hey, Cody Lee of Everyday Technologies here. Before we get back to the episode, I just wanted to say a quick word about what I believe is the industry's leading quoting and collaboration software, Paperless Parts. It helps my shop and hundreds more across North America simplify every step of the quoting process in one secure platform. With patented technology and automated costing logic built around how we work, we're able to turn RFQs quickly and accurately. It's easy to train new team members, and with ERP integration, we avoid rework after winning a job. It gives us better visibility into our pipeline and margins and helps us deliver a fast, more polished experience to our customer. And beyond the software, the Paperless Parts team has been a true partner, responsive, and genuinely invested in our success. Visit paperlessparts.com to see why we rely on it every day.
Thanks so much for joining us for this edition of Next Gen Metal Fab. I'm joined again, as I have many times in the past, by Caleb Chamberlain at OSH Cut. How you doing, Caleb?
I'm good. How are you, Tim?
Oh, just fine. And today we are joined by a special guest here, Jonathan Sessa of Fabworks. How you doing, Jonathan?
I'm doing great. Thank you guys for having me.
Pleasure's all ours. Thank you so much for joining us here. This came about because Caleb wrote about it in his monthly column in the magazine about Jonathan's business. Just fascinated me as far as that kind of collaboration and openness between y'all, because in many levels, you are direct competitors, but we're all in this to raise manufacturing, and that's a good story to tell. But just to get started, Jonathan, just kind of give me a history of your background, because in many ways it's very different from Caleb's story. So kind of bring me through your background and how you got into this business.
So we first got started in the sheet metal fabrication business 45 years ago. My grandpa first got involved in sheet metal in Camarillo, California. Back then he was doing welding, small assemblies, just a bunch of manual work. About 20, 30 years ago, my father moved the business to Ventura, California, where we are based out of now. And right around that time, CNC machines were just hitting the market as accessible to smaller consumers. So they got into turret punches, press brakes, kind of the very generic sheet metal fabrication. So growing up in the shop, I was working there weekends and in the summers through school. Always been involved in the business. I went off to get a engineering degree for mechanical engineering during COVID, so 2020, 2021. Always knew I wanted to come back and be a part of the family business. When that finished up, when I was first getting involved in the business around 2022, my first kind of big intention with how I can come in as the next generation and do things differently and kind of grow the business, take it in my own direction, was that I should double down on a lot of the larger accounts we already were doing work with. I heard out on the internet, reading a lot of fabricator articles and watching a lot of videos for manufacturing shops, that the easiest place to go get work is usually the customers you already have. It's the easiest to go market to. So reaching out to old customers, growing those accounts, getting a lot of work. Unfortunately, we got quite a bit oversaturated in a few small accounts. So we had about 80 customers at the time. Maybe 5 to 10 of those were a vast majority of our revenue. I don't think this is anything out of the ordinary for sheet metal shops of that size. I'm sure this sounds very familiar to a lot of the customer spread of many fabrication shops. We did amazing through COVID, as I think a lot of shops did. And then in the years following, 2022, 2023, I think we saw a little bit of some kind of a manufacturing recession that I heard a lot of other shops felt also, where our customers, due to supply chain issues, were pulling back a lot of orders, stopping a lot of longer POs. And that unfortunately hit us pretty hard because our few big accounts pulled a lot of their work back. So that put me in a very interesting spot where we had a lot of open capacity and we had to do something. So it was either grow accounts again, go out, find new work, or right around the time I found out about this new cool way of doing business, which is the quick turn manufacturing. It is without, I'm not sure if that's the best way to put it, rapid online manufacturing way of doing sheet metal. And seeing shops like Caleb and OSH Cut, and obviously SendCutSend, which is another great player in the industry. And I thought that that was a very interesting way to do this. I honestly knew very little about either their businesses. If they're making money, maybe they're VC startups and trying to grow and not actually profitable. But since then, we've been down that path. So we decided to invest heavily into software, the full stack of software. So from the customer quoting side of things, all the way to software that runs our factory, and completely regrow our customer base from the inside to win work for this new way of doing business.
So explain the ramp up for me specifically, especially, I mean, do you have your own nesting engine as well, or how does that work? So like, how did you shape that customer experience? So like, here's your website. All right. How are they going to upload a file and what happens? And how was that tweaked over time?
We've had many different iterations of our customer quoting portal. The first one started, it was very basic, just DXF files and only laser cutting. And then we slowly evolved that by supporting 3D files, supporting bending, supporting more services. We write all our software in-house with a small team, and it's a constant race to add more services, add more features, make the customer experience better. But there's no shortage of good ideas we have on how we want to make that experience better for our customers. And there's a lot of stuff we wish our portal did that it doesn't at this time.
You invested heavily in software. You have your own software stack. How did you find the folks to actually build this for you and actually marry that with people who, they knew sheet metal, that it actually would work? Bring me through that story.
We actually started just looking on Upwork and Fiverr for just software developers and giving that a try to go at first. Well, I'll back up one step further. The first thing we tried is to glue a bunch of off-the-shelf pieces together. We realized a little bit quickly that we were never going to get that to the level of customization that we wanted to provide the OSH Cut and SendCutSend experience. So we knew we had to go a custom direction. So we looked into Fiverr and Upwork and hiring devs. I mean, there's a lot of talent out there. Unfortunately, those people weren't extremely familiar with manufacturing and kind of the nuance of the detail that needs to go into building a manufacturing instant quoting platform. So worked with them for a while, and then I eventually realized that if we were going to have any success at this, I needed to start getting my hands dirty in software, and learned as much as I could from them while we were still paying them, made a couple versions, a couple MVPs, and for version 1 eventually was fully baked by myself, and now I have others that help me, but took that completely in-house.
Jonathan, how have you guys integrated AI? I understand that you do a little bit of vibe coding. Is that
Oh,
is that right?
I love AI. Right around the time when I started learning how to program, I think it was the golden age of AI, honestly. It was just like ChatGPT 3.5 in the browser. It was great at it couldn't code your whole code base, but it was like the best coding teacher you could ever ask for. You could ask it any difficult question and it'd give you nice little bits of code snippets. So we've been using AI to develop the platform from the start. I think originally it started out, I had to write a lot of code still. Um, and I was more or less learning from these like early LLMs. At this point, I'm a little scared to admit that I don't look at code as much as I used to, and a lot of our code is being written by these LLMs.
Something about hearing about the chat GPT 3.5 being the golden age of, of AI coding, as if it's like distant history. It almost is though. Like changing so fast. It's crazy. We use Claude a lot now. We use both Claude and Copilot and Codex, and like have the AIs like review each other's changes and stuff. It's pretty wild, actually.
Caleb, I want to get your story because, like, I want to, kind of contrast this because you guys you ended up in the same place but coming from very different origin stories. Uh, Jonathan, first of all, if Fabworks is integrated with, is there another family business on another brand, or is it all Fabworks
Yeah,
now?
well, so the family business corporate entity is Sessa Manufacturing and Welding, and that still exists to some extent. And we do actually serve a small slice of those legacy customers to this day still. It's not any work we go out and we look for. So we more or less have some customers that we've been serving for 5, 10, 15 years that is good, great work, and we continue to serve them. And we have some customers who have left us in the recent years, the last few years, and we don't go out chasing similar accounts to fill that kind of gap. The majority of our business now is fulfilled through the online platform.
It's a multi-generational family business. How did you present this idea to the family and said, all right, this, we've done business for decades like this. How about this?
Yeah, I think there's two things that happened. One of them is every new owner going into a business probably has some itch to leave their mark and do something. So I had the itch that I wanted to shake things up a little bit. And it was hard to admit then, but I can definitely admit it now that I just wanted to try different things uh and explore and kind of make it my own, right? And the second thing is because of that manufacturing recession that we went through post COVID, we kind of had a strong necessity to just and a perfect opportunity to try different things. So the timing lined up perfect where we had a ton of excess capacity to take the business in any direction we thought was going to be successful. That would have been really hard to do if we were incredibly busy. I mean, if the lasers and the press brakes and everything are running, and I came to the team and I was like, "Hey, there's a $17 part that we just got from our instant quoting platform for quantity one. Can we please get this scheduled in on today's production?" They would have absolutely been like, "This is crazy. What are we doing?" But when the lasers aren't running, and are convince people that, hey, I know this is crazy right now that we're doing one $17 part, but trust me, there's a vision here. We need to get to some kind of scale to make this make sense. If the machine's not moving, it's a little easier to make your case that maybe we should lose money on this single part to build some kind of customer base up. But
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
how does so we've talked about this before, and obviously I wrote about it in my column last month. But tell us about how the unit economics end up working out. Like, it's actually, you wouldn't think that doing a $17 one-off is actually favorable for cash flow, but it definitely is, like we had discussed. So why don't you tell that story a little bit? Like, why do the unit economics work at all when you're doing so many tiny little jobs like that?
yeah, I think there's a couple big things at play. And the first one is the model lends itself to upfront credit card orders just by nature of the service we're offering. So we went from a company that operated on net 30 terms for every single one of our customers. It was just the default. I don't think we had any customers on not net 30 terms, to now we have 90% of our orders fulfilled by credit card before we ever start working on the job. So cost up front. And then that last 10% is a mix of cost before shipment, net 10, and a little bit of net 30. So this is like a extremely drastic cash flow change for us as a business. And it's been a huge accelerator for growth. Moving all of our receivables, which used to be, because net 30 is actually more like net 45, net 60 in this industry. Moving all that up 60 to 90 days to putting cash in our pocket right away is pretty incredible. And it's very hard to do that if you're not working with an order value in the hundreds to thousands of dollars. You can't really convince a large PO to be paid up front. I mean, obviously, I'm sure there's some way you can negotiate that, but credit card, small credit card instant quoting orders lend themselves to this very upfront cash flow. And the other thing that makes a big difference, which I think people don't think about enough when they see these very cheap parts that you can order from Fabworks or OSH Cut, and they go, "How are they making money selling me a $17 bracket, quantity one?" And the magic is this bracket would be, I don't know, maybe $1 at scale, right? $1 for quantity 1,000, but for quantity one, it's $17. Well, if I can run 100 or 1,000 customers bracket at the same time, and I'm charging them $17 each for all of their brackets, I have a great scale aggregation there that I wouldn't be getting if I was only running larger production work. And the psychology behind this is obviously customers, as they should, expect some kind of quantity discount at scale. So as they order more and more, we should be getting our price closer to our cost of goods. But when you bring the order quantity down to these really small orders, couple $100, couple $1,000 for orders, customers expect to pay a slight price premium there, as they would from any shop. And if you can somehow use and the magic is we can use software and automation and good processes, good systems to run all these orders together at the same time profitably. That's where the real margin cash flow unlock is.
Yeah, yeah, I see an analogous to. I always think, when I first saw you guys enter the market, and especially when, I mean, back when, just to give you a history, back in 2010, I visited a shop in Belgium called 24/7 Taylor Steel, and they had online ordering back in the early 2000s, with a software that's still called Sophia. So it's a European company. Last time I checked, they had about more than 50 lasers, and they got dozens and dozens of tube lasers, and they're cut bend, and plenty of automatic tool change press brakes. So they've scaled up nicely, multi-plant. And when I first saw that, then I initially, because I'm in the publishing world, and I think, well, that's an analogous to, and I was reading the Google biography, was it multi-billions of dollars, a nickel at a time, where Google became what it is because of the ad program, the utterly automated ad program. The front end was essentially automated, and the presentation of those ads, which is like the content, the organic search was automated. So that's automated content. You automate the front end, and the products come out the back end, and you can scale up incredibly. And especially if you're first to market, this is what can happen. And obviously, we've seen that with a lot of software platforms. Now, of course, AI is changing the whole game, and we haven't. That's stirred up the pot nicely. But but then, Caleb, just kind of, pivoting to you. You have some big news to share. There's some Ohio presence, I hear now. So you're in Cincinnati along with Utah. So kind of bring me through that expansion.
Yeah, well, we moved to our current shop in Utah in 2024 in January. And then within 2 years, we were out of space. We were sitting in a meeting talking about, do we move all of our tube operation to a new building? What do we do here? And then it was brought up actually by our customer support legend, where we should just open a new factory out east so that we're closer to customers. And like the moment it was said, it was like, oh yeah, that's obviously what we should do. So we got wheels turning. That was like 6 months ago, and now we're on the verge of opening Cincinnati as our second factory, a lot closer to customers. So
And again, this happens with scale. And I mean, this is an utterly different operation from a typical fab shop. And we've talked about it before, about how everything is connected and it's very high mix. And you have to, this is the OSH Cut way. How do you transfer the OSH Cut way? And that's a very common thing in many kinds of businesses. They don't want to open up another operation because you lose that kind of control because you're not there seeing it. Kind of describe that for me as far as how what, and that, of course, it hasn't opened quite yet, right? So now you're in the progress. So, what's going on now as far as to expand the OSH Cut way?
Jonathan mentioned that software systems help them like streamline and fulfill, and that's exactly right for us too. A lot of the operational know-how is actually, it's not institutional knowledge like you might have it in traditional shop where you've got your old hands that know how everything works. It's like it's baked into the software, and the software tells operators what to do and how to do it. And here's how you print a label, all that kind of stuff. So there's that. The other piece, of course, is culture, which is really important. And to help bootstrap the culture out there, we're moving 17 employees out um, to kind of create the base load, and then we're actually probably next week starting to hire out there as well. So, um, but yeah, the bulk of the people out there will be like people who moved from our Utah facility who kind of know how the operation runs.
Jonathan, kind of walk, we've talked in previous episodes with Caleb about his operation step by step, what he has, the value he's adding. He adds tube cutting, now he has tube bending. So Jonathan, walk me through your shop floor as far as, the value FabWork provides. When a customer uploads a part to FabWorks, kind of bring me through the chain of events that happen to a quick delivery.
Yeah, so I think most of the quick turn manufacturers, at least the ones that are very software automated, all have a very big overlap in service offerings because those are the ones that happen to be very easy to or much easier to automate with software than some of the more open-ended pieces of manufacturing like CNC milling, right? So we only offer laser cutting, that's sheet and tube, and that system
And
is
bending. You guys
and bending.
you guys do
Yeah,
bending.
flat sheet, bending, and tube. No tube bending though yet. Maybe one day. And then all the other sheet metal add-on services that are supplementary to those, hardware, countersinking, tapping. But the bulk of it is that 2D blanking and then the press brake bending. And this slice of manufacturing is shockingly constrained versus a lot of other types of manufacturing. And it's very easy to build the whole software stack to understand sheet metal fabrication from a first principles level. So we can write software that helps automate every step of the process somewhat easily. We've managed to do it as a relatively small shop. In one day, OSH Cut, they were also small and managed to do it. And I think the other manufacturing disciplines are much harder to to get such a seamless end-to-end automated experience from. They will come someday, though.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked about, the challenges of, all right, weld fixturing. How do you, and then also all the value beyond that. And but you mentioned shockingly constrained. What do you mean by that?
Maybe Caleb has a good answer here. I think you would.
Well, yeah, with CNC machining, like you need to figure out what your tool paths are going to be, your feeds and speeds. You have to select your tools, and above all, you have to figure out how to fixture it. And none of those things are easy per se. And there's also no closed form solution, meaning there could be 1,000 different ways to actually get this done, especially on the fixturing front. But with sheet metal, you put a piece of flat metal on the deck and you cut it. And then you bring it over to a press brake and you smash it between a punch and a die. And there's just like far fewer ways to do it compared to CNC machining. And you can certainly get creative to fix problems with die access and gauging surfaces and whatever. But like at the end of the day, there's just not that many ways to make it. And it's really easy to look at it from first principles and say, can this be done or not? And fixturing's kind of a non-issue from the get-go. So like it is definitely an easier service to get your feet wet with and way easier to automatically bid. So
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Recently, I talked with a software company. We'll be doing a tech spotlight on them in the coming weeks. But it's called a flow form technology where it's an advanced kind of scheduling where they take a spaghetti diagram and optimize the flow and optimize the schedule and optimize and try to, and there's a potential to optimize the nest. But whenever I see, I talked to, we just published, we're going to publish in June our Fab 40, which is, some of the largest contract fabricators. What's interesting is that a lot of similar story with a lot of those guys is they are actually shedding the smaller quantity stuff because it sends a ripple of uncertainty through all their other production work.
Mm.
which they need excess capacity for, and they need to be able to respond to their customers, especially data center customers that have immense volume. But when they some of them are telling you these stories about as they scale up the value stream, let's say the one that I've talked about in one story is a laser punch combo as it relates to a laser punch combo as it relates to a robotic bender, as it relates to a robotic welder, and the optimization you can get by having a certain nest and forming certain forms on the punch press versus forming certain forms on the press brake versus how it's welded. And there's all this optimization that they can do as quantities rise, and they can just perfect it and take the costs out of this and make it more robust. It's basically one step beyond design for manufacturability, where you're actually having a whole flow of, okay, how can we make all of these processes work together better? That's the value of quantity. We can really make it so the guy told me an analogous, it's kind of like a prog day on a stamping press. That's the optimum, is that it just goes right through and it's done. Boom. That's the ultimate synchronization of production, is within a prog die and a stamping press. We're just expanding that prog die from laser cutting to bending to welding and assembly. And as the volumes rise, there's all this optimization that we can do. But I'm thinking with your business model, with the scaling up of the smaller quantities mixed with larger quantities of everything, of the huge long tail, where you're not shedding that tail because it sends disruption. Yeah. Is there potential there where you could actually mix and match jobs and have some intelligence there, where you say, all right, all these orders came in, we've grouped these orders. This is how we can mix and match these on the value stream to optimize it.
I could talk about this for hours because it's something we're really working on right now internally to try to figure out those things. Um, but Jonathan, it sounds like you had something to say on it too. So I won't try.
Yeah.
I'll try not to dominate the conversation, but
Well,
uh,
we've talked about this a lot, just you and I. But scheduling is very hard. A very hard mathematical problem. And the funny thing we've started to realize recently, and I'm sure Caleb, you've seen this also, is when your lead times are 3 to 4 weeks, or you're doing large production work, high quantity work, scheduling is probably everything. It makes or breaks your shop. Especially when things are sitting as work in progress for weeks at a time. We now have a average order of, for rush orders, I think 2.5, 3 days. If you just keep a little bit excess capacity and you push things through your shop very quickly, and you have decently constrained processes, so we're very selective on off menu work, we call it, that we bring in the door, the scheduling issue more or less goes away. Obviously, things get crazy once you start to hit your capacity ceiling, but a way to combat the complexity of high quantity scheduling is to simplify all the processes and keep the lead times very short, and keep everything, like the value streaming, incredibly straightforward for the whole shop. That's all I have to say. I want to hear what Kayla has to say.
no, that's totally right. Like that's actually the lean approach, right? It's all just flow. If you put it in the pipe, it'll flow and ship fast. You turn that work into dollars fast, and there you go. So instead of like creating some massive optimization problem that's literally impossible to solve perfectly, you simplify the operation from first principles so that you can just like push whatever at any time and then it works. Um, the flip side of that is that like you can do all that stuff, but like you said, when you start hitting your capacity ceiling, everything breaks. And there's two pieces of that. One is, how do you understand where the capacity ceiling is when you have 3,500 unique SKUs going through the system this week that you've never made before? Um, and like, how do you know what lead time to promise? And of course, if you're growing fast, how do you ensure that you get new capacity online fast enough that you don't start dropping the ball? And it's this really tricky mix of CapEx capacity planning, trying not to get overhead of your skis, but also not falling backwards onto the slope because you don't have enough capacity, combined with like trying not to make promises you can't keep inside an extremely complex system. And then on top of that, there's always like the lasers the lasers want everything combined all the time, like to optimize material efficiency and changeover time and labor to bring material over. Um, you always want to cut a full sheet or multiple full sheets, ideally, and that means if you've got 2 weeks of work, you should put all 2 weeks of this material on the deck. But then downstream, you create like seek time bottlenecks and buffers and lost parts and all kinds of complexity. So there's somewhere in there, there's like an optimum, which is I'm gonna nest this under this condition. I'll top it off with this under this condition. Um, but yeah, it's a constant search for us. We're trying to figure out where the optimum is, and we want to get more pull based because the lasers would be push based, right? The lasers are like I'm just going to optimize material efficiency, and then everything downstream just drowns in parts if you do that. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting trade offs in there.
Yeah, I remember visiting a shop in Japan years ago where they were all pull based. Obviously, they were very lean shop. I mean, it's permeated deep into the culture there, and the nests were so open. It was, I mean, it was just as if they didn't care. It just was like, I mean, the web sections were so huge, and there was no material optimization, and but who cared? No, we need to flow things through the factory in 2 days or less. And and they changed over constantly, but they saw their constraint process was informing, so that didn't matter. It's like, no, it's like we don't need we have excess laser cutting capacity for what we have. But granted, yeah, it's the capacity. When you go against capacity, that's the wall. That's like, uh-oh. Now, regarding material yield, though, I mean, is as you grow, is there ways to increase that material yield to actually I'm drawing from more jobs, so I can actually there's more ways to optimize this, or do you say no, let's hold back, we don't want to cut this too early? What's your strategy on that, Caleb?
I'm interested in Jonathan's take on this too, but ours is, I mean, it's obvious. Yes. Like if you have fewer options and you can steer customers to those options, then you almost always can combine things to get better material utilization and create fewer drops that you have to then inventory and mess with. So, on the flip side, I mean, you might be talking about a 3% improvement in, um, material costs, which might be, I don't know, that 25% to half of your cost of goods sold. Um, so there's a point of diminishing returns at which, nesting early doesn't actually yield that much improvement in your cost. Um, but
Mm.
really it depends on what all's happening, what else contributes to the cost of the part, what other operations are being performed. So
Yeah, Jonathan, I kind of want to hear your story especially because you transitioned from a traditional custom fab shop with production orders, local customers, legacy parts, that's it, to this. So describe the new life of your laser cutting operator.
Yeah, well, it started with a single material rack, so a vertical s- sheet storage rack, and we only offered as many materials as we could fit on the rack. So we kept it very, very slim at first. I think maybe 15 or so. We've since grown that to around, I want to say 45 or 50 different SKUs of material. So that's only 4 different types, maybe 6 grades, and then obviously the common spreads of thicknesses throughout there, which is a lot different than a lot of the other companies in the industry like OSH Cut, who offer a pretty amazing large catalog of materials. And we get constant pressure from our customers every week of, hey, you don't have this exact thickness. You don't, can you do this weird type of copper or this weird type of brass? And we have to say no a lot, unfortunately, which I don't love, saying no to all this very easy work that they're trying to hand us. But it's not necessarily just the nesting efficiency, but there's a lot of just material handling, material storage takes up a lot of space. So we've been really diligent so far as we've been growing to keep the catalog as absolutely as small as we can get by on. I'm sure it will grow someday to win more work and win other types of jobs, but yeah, that's a way we've attempted to kind of set ourselves apart a little bit from the others in the industry is keep the offerings really slow, and then hopefully we can benefit a little more from some aggregation there, a little better economics of scale at every point along the way. Because yeah, most of the time now we are running full or mostly full sheets, and that was definitely not the case early on. And we actually talked a lot early on about how we can optimize our scrap utilization. Do we need to invent software that nests things on already existing remnants? So, you cut a bunch of parts out and you have a little bit left, and a $17 order comes in. Do you want software that nests it on this already existing skeletonized sheet? What we kind of realized is if you keep the offerings pretty slim and you reach that point of scale quick enough where you're mostly running a good maybe quarter, half full sheet, you don't need any fancy software like that. As you scale to infinity, you're always running full sheets of every single material at every point in time. So we've kind of tried to not worry about the material utilization rate too much. We've assumed that as we grow, it will get better. So we've just kept it under control and um, just going from there.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's very similar to what Caleb has talked about with his sales pipeline. Jonathan, I wanted to follow up too. The customers range from hobbyists to OEMs. What's the spectrum?
Our biggest slice is tech startups in California. So we obviously have a little bit of a proximity advantage there, being just north of LA. And we find ourselves doing a lot of work for space, robotics industries. And it's usually R&D prototyping work, not high volume stuff, usually nothing quite as small as a hobbyist level. So we've been pretty happy with that mix, and we think it's a great kind of uh, niche within a niche, if you, without a lack of a better term to put it. But there's obviously a lot of different customers that are looking for fast sheet metal, whether it's OEMs looking for fast high production orders or hobbyists looking for very small orders at a good price and good speed. And then there's this nice kind of middle chunk where it's definitely businesses, some smaller businesses, also to larger businesses, but all pretty small orders and dealing directly with the engineers. So very few purchasers are working with us. The engineers are more or less sending the quotes to the purchaser just to check out with, but the engineers are the ones that are interacting with us, getting the quotes, doing any back and forth, which is great for us too, because it's very easy to give feedback when if they have parts that can't be manufactured. It's uh, very nice to deal with an engineer who's designing the part rather than having to deal with a purchaser and be one more layer removed. So we feel like we can provide a really good customer experience to those kind of people also. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of bring me through kind of the history of metal fab in that area. You're north of Long Beach. Is that where you are?
Yeah,
Or
about an hour north of LAX. So yeah, right around there.
okay.
Yeah, there's
So,
there's not much fabrication in this area. There, as you get down to LA, obviously there's a lot of things in LA, so there's quite a bit of manufacturing, but it's honestly not a hotspot for anything like this. I mean, the whole state isn't, but I think we just got lucky because we've been here. I have no intention to move out of where we are, and there's obviously been a technology boom that's happened over the last several decades, and now there's a what seems to be an awesome hardware boom where there's a lot of awesome hardware startups who need a lot of metal, and they happen to be right down the door. So I knew Caleb was saying earlier that he's has a good proximity now by opening the second facility to the people on the East Coast. I think there's like even a step further than being 1 to 2 days away from your customer, where you get kind of more or less the McMaster car approach, where you're always within an hour away from the person you're trying to order parts from. And we're sending Uber courier deliveries almost daily to customers down in LA, getting saving the day of shipping on that, which has been, I think a good advantage and differentiator for us. I'm sure it won't hold forever, but I wouldn't be surprised if those of us that are really pushing for some amount of speed, and if speed is really the end goal of what our value proposition is, then we need to get really close to our end customers.
Right, right. There's a shop I visited in San Jose, inland, where it's funny because like I made a joke to my wife because I drove there and then I said, "Honey, I've got a post-it note. I'm gonna make a Facebook post because the Facebook is right there. Then the sign, dad joke, sorry, but the quarter headquarters is right there. But it's amazing. But the big story there was the fact that yes, you can still manufacture in some of in the most expensive real estate in the country. Do you regarding talent? Do you have a hard time finding talent in that area, or I mean, you have a multi-generation family business there, though, so obviously you have a legacy presence.
Yeah, we have some legacy presence, but we've honestly had to do a lot of hiring in the last couple of years, and I think it's no different than anyone else. And I really don't like the we have a we have a talent shortage mentality that a lot of shops give off. I think a lot of shops just have boring old equipment that was state of the art 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, it was really easy to get a young guy in off the street and say, "Hey, here's this 1989 press brake. It's the new cool thing. Can you let's teach you how to run it?" And they'd be very stoked and happy to do that. And then now they have that same 1989 press brake, and it's very difficult to find someone graduating out of high school that wants to come and run that machine. So we've invested in a lot of new, awesome, cool equipment to make what we do possible. And with that, it is gotten much easier to hire new talent because all the machines have big touch screens on them, and the younger guys related to like, oh, it's like learning to run the press brake is almost like playing a video game, and it comes natural to me, and I know how to work with the touch screen and work with technology. Same with our shop software. Every single machine has a touchscreen computer at it, and yeah, it feels fun and new and state of the art to learn, and then that makes it easier to bring people in and get them motivated about the trade again.
Right, right, right. And I know Caleb had a similar situation in Utah. It's not a metal fab hotspot, though there are significant shops out there. But then when you move to Cincinnati, so Cincinnati, obviously, a lot, hundreds and hundreds of years of fabrication or manufacturing, not hundreds and hundreds, but you know what I mean. And regarding that, the hiring approach, and building a staff, you're right in the thick of it. How's that going?
We haven't started working on hiring locally out there yet, but we actually think we'll have a relatively easy time of it. Maybe that'll come back and bite me, but like we pay our people in Utah a lot more than the median wage for manufacturers in the Cincinnati area. Um, so like I think it's more expensive to move it to live in Utah at the moment, at least. It will be interesting though, because naturally we'll now be competing with an ecosystem of manufacturers which doesn't exist in Utah, and competing with all the big tier one, primes and auto manufacturers and that kind of thing too. So we will see.
We've been chatting a while, guys. I can't thank you enough. So, Jonathan, just as to close this thing out, where do you see FabWorks going in 3 to 5 years? What's your long term game plan there?
Honestly, things have changed so fast over the last 12 months for us that I am unsure where the goalpost is now. For a while, it was starting Fabrics was out of pure necessity to get the business profitable again, coming off of a bad year or two, and it's grown way past expectations. So we don't know how far we're going to push it, but we're definitely going to keep riding the growth wave as new customers come to us, and we're getting a lot of awesome feedback, and people love using the service. And I think the whole online instant quoting manufacturing space is going to boom over the next 5 to 10 years, and it will be the norm on how most parts are ordered. So we're happy to be a part of it, and going to see where it takes us.
All right, Caleb, any final thoughts?
Nope. Well, I guess one thing I've been kind of thinking about as we've talked is that, obviously Jonathan and I compete with each other in the online space. But I just think, I just submitted my article for next month's Fabricator. We talk about this McKinsey study where they went and determined that there's like 71,000 manufacturers that are expected to close in the next 10 years. And meanwhile, demand is growing, as industry wide. So I just think there's going to be this big capacity vacuum. I don't think that OSH Cut or Fabworks or SendCutSend alone would be able to scale fast enough to absorb all that demand that's going to be created. And meanwhile, we do slightly different things that appeal to slightly different customers. We are all about we've got like 600 different materials at OSH Cut and growing. If a customer asks for it, we want to add it, and we do, and so it just grows fast. But that means actually it costs us more we take up more floor space just to store things. And that ramps up our cost structure a little bit. So that makes us a little bit different from Fabworks, and different from SendCutSend as well. So in this big space where you've got hundreds of thousands of people kind of bouncing around, exploring the space, looking at who to buy from, we will all tend to attract different people, and that means it's not a zero-sum game, really. We create net new demand by making things easy and serving different classes of customers. And overall, I'm just optimistic about the trajectory of metal fab in general. And I can't wait to see what collective impact we have on how things are manufactured here as we all get better.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's good timing because I just, as I mentioned, I just finished putting together the Fab 40 feature package, which will be coming out in June. And by the time this hits the airwaves, it should already be live. But talking with the various Fab 40 companies, the large contract fabricators up to 500, 600 million sometimes in annual revenue, some of them, obviously there's some head-on competition, especially with the data center work and a lot of the opportunities going out there. But in many ways, they are so different. I always say the customer mix defines the metal fabricator. And there's infinite ways to mix that customer base, mix the manufacturing technologies, and unique ways to serve that customer. And so that's why with any FMA event at FabTech, it's a lot of camaraderie. It is not a zero-sum game because everybody's kind of working together to serve a common goal. And carving their own niche to be successful. So there's so much opportunity. So guys, thank you so much for your time. And as always, thanks so much for tuning in for Next Gen Metal Fab. And we'll see you next time.
The Next Gen Metal Fab podcast is a production of Fabricators and Manufacturers Association and part of the FMA Podcast Network. The show is hosted by Tim Heston and Caleb Chamberlain. The podcast is produced and edited by Garrett Slager and Dana Weicker. Additional production support by Dan Davis, Andy Flando, Mike Owens, Billy Culpa, Elizabeth Gavin, and me, Sarah Spring. Thank you for listening.